Hey guys, it is Friday. Oh man, let me fix this camera. What do we have going on here? Okay, it is Friday. Sorry, wrong fucking day. Sunday. Holy shit, it's Sunday. And it's late because I was doing shit today. We had a friend in town, we had drinks, dinner, that kind of stuff, and the day kind of got away from me. I thought I would be done sooner. So here we are, back to the shadow question. I hope everyone had a great Sunday. I actually did. I cleaned an entire floor of my house. My house is super old and it's big, and the entire thing is hardwood floors and like ornate trim and that kind of thing. It's super hard to keep it clean, especially because I have 2 dogs. There's a lot of windows and and our trim is black throughout the entire house. It's whoever's lived in here before us has maintained this like dark black trim, which looks really cool, but it is very hard to keep clean because you see dirt really easily. So anyway, enough about that. So the shadow series, today I'm exploring the question of how do our triggers hold us back from reaching our higher self or from progressing to higher versions of ourselves? And what I mean by the word triggers is those hot button subjects, right? And we all have them and we all have different triggers, okay? This is not like a joke, like people like to joke about people being triggered. This is like, we all actually have triggers, okay? So hopefully nobody interprets it as me making fun of you, okay? So perhaps your trigger is somebody making a racist joke, right? Hopefully we are all at least a little bit triggered by racism, or let's say bothered, okay? So let's actually differentiate here. Triggers are things that we get irrationally upset about. This would be, for instance, something that you see posted online, for instance, in your feed, and instead of scrolling by or unfriending the person or whatever, right, you feel compelled to not just comment, but engage in an ongoing argument with somebody who's not interested in seeing your point of view. It's completely irrational. Neither of you are changing each other's minds. Yet you are so upset about this topic that you devote time, like serious time out of your day, okay? So that's a trigger. Another way of thinking about a trigger is something that induces extreme emotion, okay? So this could be something that has traumatically happened to you in the past, okay? Whether it was physical, emotional, or psychological, okay? So there's lots of things that we can be triggered by. Having triggers is not a bad thing, okay? So what we're actually exploring today is how do these triggers show up for us? Because these triggers are part of our shadow self. So we've, in this series, we've been going through what is our shadow self? How does it show up for us in our lives? And then how does it showing up in our lives prevent us from being a better version of ourselves, prevent us from progressing forward, prevent us from getting what we want in life, ascending to higher levels of spirituality, whatever your goal is, okay? So a trigger is normal. We all have them. Letting it rule your life, though, is not constructive, right? It's also not productive, and it definitely will hold you back, okay? Now, that being said, you should always seek counseling if you have something that induces that visceral of an emotional reaction when somebody says or does, or you see something, right, that you are actually triggered by it. For instance, something that somebody would need to put a trigger warning on a post, that is something you should seek counseling for, okay? I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it is something that you might want to explore as perhaps I need to work through this. Perhaps I have unresolved things that I need to work through, even if you have been counseled already. I'm saying this from a place of experience. If you have gone through counseling and you still experience those visceral reactions to certain things, and you actually do it, the counseling isn't done. Okay, it is still an issue for you. And so continue to work through that. So part of the aspect of the shadow self is exploring, why is this happening? So tonight, the question is not why is this happening? The question is actually, how do our triggers hold us back, right, from progressing? The trigger exists wherever it came from already, that happened. That's up to you to figure that part out. Perhaps that's what counseling is for. But what we're looking at right now is, how do those triggers hold us back? So as far as our shadow, right? So this is the card that comes up for that. There's a little bit of a glare from my light. So the 10 of Wands. Usually 10s of any suit, well, not of any suit. Usually the 10 of Wands is a fortuitous card. This is the completion of a cycle. This is, you have been successful in whatever your endeavors were in life, okay? So just from a straightforward interpretation, this is, you've achieved something, okay? But from a shadow perspective, what we're actually asking here is, why do you feel the need to be on all the time? What do you carry the weight of the world on your shoulders? And what do you gain from this behavior? Okay? So specific to the shadow, when you feel triggered by something, okay? Let's say that your trigger is sexual harassment, okay? I would say probably every single woman gets sexually harassed at some point in her life. And that could be anything from outright, inappropriate comments to quid pro quo to cat calls. I mean, like, there's an enormous spectrum of this. Okay, so let's say that that's our example. It's normal to be bothered by that happening. Okay, so take that into consideration. So we should all be bothered by sexual harassment. But do you go looking for it online? Do you engage in unproductive conversations about it, right? And is the way that you engage in it not just unproductive for teaching the person who did it, so the person who committed the act of sexual harassment, it's not productive for them, they don't care, you're not changing their mind or their behavior, but it's also incredibly unproductive for you. You're upsetting yourself, you're wasting your time. It's time you could spend otherwise doing something else much more productive and much more beneficial, to be quite honest, right? If some guy on the internet is leaving shitty comments and you feel it is your job to rip him apart, I guarantee you he doesn't care, okay? If he's the kind of person that does that, he's also the kind of person that doesn't care if you go in white knight. He doesn't care if you're the kind of, he is not the kind of person that is going to benefit from education, okay? So feeling the need to be on, right? To fight everyone else's battle for them. This is also how this shows up, right? So let's say that you see two people doing something and it has nothing to do with you, and you feel like one of them offended or said something to the other person, and you feel the need to step in. And most of the time we're not doing this in real life. Most of the time this is online, because we feel much more comfortable being in confrontational situations when we're behind a keyboard and a screen, right? A lot of people, most people, let's say most people, almost everyone, says things online they would never say to another person in person, live, right? Because there's a very real threat of that person potentially hurting you or something like that. Or maybe you're just not that brave in person, and that's fine. But let's say that you see this exchange happen that triggers you, right? Whatever the subject matter is, or the way that it's said, or something like that, and you feel compelled to jump in and either give your 2 cents or tell the person who is the offender what you think of them, okay? Why is it your fight? In some cases, it absolutely needs to be said. If you see an injustice occur, there are instances where somebody needs to intervene, but is it always your fight? Do you always need to intervene? Is there perhaps no point, right? I'm a firm believer in there are lots of people who should just be written off, okay? I used to be that person that every time I saw someone say something stupid online, I was like, holy shit, I gotta tell this person what I think about them, okay? My background is in nutrition as a registered dietitian. I have multiple degrees in that field. And nutrition is one of the things that is as dogmatic, believe it or not, as religion or politics. And lots of people think they know all about nutrition, right? Because they can Google it. And they have a friend that lost weight doing this and their doctor said whatever, right? And 99% of them are wrong. 99% of the information you read online about weight loss and diet, for instance, is completely wrong, okay? I used to spend a lot of time jumping into those conversations and going, well, actually, guess what? Nobody cares. Nobody wants to hear, if somebody is determined to believe that grape juice fasts are gonna help them detox their liver, they're gonna fucking drink grape juice for 3 days straight and probably get sick, and they don't care what you have to say. They don't care how much more you know. They don't know how much more educated you are. They don't care, all right? They're gonna listen to whatever confirms their own bias, so their confirmation bias. And these things that we tend to get triggered over tend to be those highly dogmatic things, right? Political issues, social issues, religion, right? And you may be right and they may be wrong, but is engaging in that conversation with them really worth your time? Or are they just another asshole on the internet that you should block? Okay? So this is where our triggers are holding us back. They are massive time wasters if they compel us. Now, having a trigger over something is not necessarily a time waster, but if it is compelling you to engage in arguments and conversations that are not productive, okay? Like you're not talking to someone that's receptive to your point of view, you're shouting someone down, and then they're shouting you down. Nobody listens when you yell, okay? How many times have you changed your mind when someone got in your face and screamed at you? Probably zero. So when you do that to someone else, just because you're triggered over whatever the subject is, that's not productive for you. And the energy that you take on when you do that is so wholly negative. It's like you're putting a brick wall in front of yourself, right? That you just cannot walk through, okay? Now, like I said, we all have these triggers. We all have these subjects. It's completely normal to see something and like you have that visceral reaction, like I have to say something to that person. That person is a piece of shit and I need to let them know, okay? We all have that initial reaction to certain subjects, all right? And some of those subjects are completely worthy that we should feel that way, right? When we see somebody say something racist, that person is a complete piece of shit and we do want to let them know that, okay? But engaging in an ongoing conversation with that person is probably not productive. So your two options are tell them you're a complete piece of shit and then block them and move on with your life, or just don't engage at all, right? It's kind of up to you. In either instance, it's not likely that that person is going to change to either one of those responses. People with those types of problematic ideologies are typically not open to hearing why their ideology is problematic, okay? People on the internet saying things to them tends not to change them, okay? That's a slightly pessimistic view, but I've been on this earth for almost 38 years, going here in a couple of weeks, actually, 38 years. I've been on this earth and I've worked with people in all walks of life, lots of different places, and that's human nature, okay? And I think that most of us have experienced that if we've been around long enough, right? So why do you feel the need? Why do you feel like this weight, right, is on your shoulders, okay? The trigger is not going to get any better. The fact that you are triggered by a particular thing is not going to go away or get better, and you're not going to get less triggered the more you verbalize, the more you verbally get into arguments with people over it. Okay? Now, flip side of that, is there any way that we can harness that trigger or deal with it in order to not let it hold us back, to stop it from preventing us from moving forward? Okay? So this one from the occult deck, Ten of Swords, right? So Ten of Swords is kind of the ultimate failure, right? Like everything's gone wrong. You've finally failed. This isn't a typical read, right? The failure is complete, right? So now you're ready to start again, whatever that cycle is or that next journey. Okay. From a shadow perspective, what we're looking at here is, instead of interpreting it as the cycle of failure is complete or the failure is over, this is the death of the ego. Okay. So when we ask the question, how do our triggers hold us back? How are they problematic? How do they stand in the way from our higher selves or from us moving forward and progressing? And then we ask the question, how can we harness that, or how do we move past that, right? So the death of the ego is the answer. Triggers are destructive, right? They're destructive thoughts and behaviors. They are the things that we do have that deep, visceral, emotional reaction to. And they are based on things that we have gone through. And this is the whole concept of the shadow, right? It is our self, the dark parts of ourself, the traumatic things, the hurtful things, the angry, the things that we have had happen to us or that we have done, that we feel anger, guilt, shame, and emotional trauma or psychological trauma, and sometimes physical trauma, okay? So the death of the ego, right? So what this is talking about is these destructive thoughts, these triggers that are destructive, right? They hold us back. They stop us from progressing. And in many cases, they're irrational, okay? We've already talked a whole lot about how irrational it is to see Jane Smith in a Facebook group say something and you lose your shit on her, right? You don't know her, you don't know her life. Maybe she's a complete tool, right? Maybe she is a complete piece of shit and maybe she needs to hear that. But you're not going to change her opinion. You're not going to change her life, and she's not going to change your mind, right? So sometimes it is best to just walk away and go, you know what? This isn't worth my time. This is destructive and this is holding me back. How much time do I spend on this every day or week or month? How much time did I devote to that Facebook argument? That was, and I'll be quite honest with you, that was the old me. Like I said, like I can remember days where I probably spent 4 to 6 hours cumulatively throughout the day arguing with people online and over nothing important, nothing life-changing, nothing that was going to change their minds, and they certainly weren't going to change my mind because we both thought we were right. Or things that I saw that I was like, holy shit, that's incredibly horrible. You're a horrible person. Why would you say that? Guess what? They don't care that they're a horrible person. And you telling them that isn't going to change them. 9 times out of 10, stepping back and I think we've all gone through that experience where we see something and we immediately start to type a comment or a reply. And then halfway through, you just stop. You're just like, you know what? I don't need to post this comment. I don't care that much about this. I'm going to walk away from this, okay? And those moments are when you know that you have made a tiny step forward, right? Doing that over and over and over, scrolling past it, blocking that person, shutting them out of your life is when you start making big steps forward. Hey, it's actually, these cards are the occult tarot. I have the box here. They're based on the Goetic demons. So I use an actual shadow deck, the Darkwood Tarot, as my main deck. That's what it looks like. And then typically I pull from the Occult Tarot as sort of a clarification card. Maybe not clarification, I guess characterizing it. So the first card I will pull as far as like asking a question, and the second card I will pull as how do we take this seemingly dark aspect of ourselves and turn it into a strength. These two decks I feel like work very well together typically. Thank you. So this being that death of the ego, right? The ego is what wants us to engage that person. It wants us to tell them how we think about them, right? Because our opinion of them has got to be really fucking important, and they have got to care about our opinion about them. And most of the time they don't. I've been doing a lot of shadow work myself. It's this whole series that I do is shadow reads. So yeah, thanks. It's cool. As soon as we can realize and admit that A, nobody gives a shit about our opinion about them, and B, our opinion about them, we shouldn't even give a shit about, right? Move on. Let it go, okay? The universe has ways of dealing with those people. Feel empathy for them, feel pity for them, feel bad for them. Typically those people are fairly negative, miserable people, and they get what's coming for them. Now, that being said, perhaps you're the negative, miserable person. I've known a few of those people too that are, and again, we're using the word trigger as in everyone has triggers. Everyone has those shadow aspects that make us react very, very strongly emotionally to a particular subject or image or theme or something like that. I know people who have 1,000 triggers. They are triggered by absolutely everything, and they are that person. So like, remember in this one, why do you feel compelled to jump into that conversation or all of those conversations? Why do you feel like the weight of the world rests on your shoulders to make that comment, to change that person's mind? Why is it your job to fix what's wrong with that person or those people or that group, right? That's not the example. So this is that, be the example, take a deep breath, walk away. Sometimes walking away from ignorance, so again, back to the subject of racism, what we're seeing right now, right? We're seeing people protesting for basic human rights to be treated as humans, right? Equally. And there are people who are against that, which is mind-blowing. I don't quite understand how you aren't in support of your fellow human beings being treated equally, but that aside, when I see people like that online, I have known enough ignorant racists to know that my comment to them is not going to change their mind. Maybe it will temporarily make me feel good to say, you're a fucking piece of shit, okay? But it didn't change their mind. It just showed them that the other side is hateful. It reinforced the fact that they believe that anti-racists are hateful people, right? Whatever their narrative is, the majority of the time, it's best to walk away from that kind of ideology and show them that you are not that person. Now, if you do engaging in a way where the ego is not involved, right? It's not you trying to prove them wrong, you trying to tell them how shitty of a person they are, like that angry, visceral, emotional reaction, while valid, right, in many of these cases, when it comes to things that are unethical or lack integrity or dishonorable, right? Things that violate other people's human rights, it's completely valid to feel those feelings about that person and about their opinions or what they've done or their actions, okay? But again, is that going to reinforce what they think about you, okay? Is that going to further their ideology and support it? Or what if you were like, hey man, let's chat, right? If you were to engage somebody in a way that didn't make them feel confronted or didn't back them up against a wall, and gave them the opportunity to speak rationally and calmly, most of the time they can't rationally and calmly state that opinion, right? Because it's not based on facts, you know, those, most of them anyway, depending on what subject we're talking about. So that being said, the death of the ego, right? So stop trying to prove everyone wrong, even if they are wrong, okay? It's not your job to prove them wrong. It's your job to show them that you're right. And there's a big difference between prove someone wrong and show them that you're right. So that's it. That's the shadow read for tonight. I will be back this week, probably, I don't know, Tuesday or Wednesday. You guys have a good night.